Hello and welcome to another question time stream here in Virtual Legality. If this is your first time on one of these streams, this is going to be hopefully a fairly relaxed conversation with me. This is, of course, a feature that is supported by the awesome patrons over at Patreon. If you look over here, this senior associate level is what makes question time possible and is what makes it work for everybody. If you've got a question and you're at that tier, you can submit it and I will definitely answer it if I've got it in the time to answer in one of these question time streams. Otherwise, because these awesome patrons make something like this possible, very often I'm answering questions from the rest of the community, which is in fact the case today. The patrons at that $10 and above level didn't submit questions this week, and so people that want to ask me questions about basically anything about the videos that we've done this month, about what you're playing, what I'm playing, what we're watching together, I'm more than happy to talk about. This is a casual stream, hopefully one where we get to talk as a community about what we've seen in video games and elsewhere. And for the most part, I really enjoy these streams happening at the end of the week. I think a lot of us have long work weeks. We do a lot of, YouTube videos as well as run law firms. Maybe not everybody, but some of us here on the stream. And it's always nice to get a chance to chat with a lot of you here in a stream like this one. And I do these intros primarily to make sure that you all can hear me. So if somebody could just confirm that the microphone is coming through loud and clear, that this stream is working on YouTube, I would very much appreciate it. And we can talk about basically whatever you like. We've covered a lot in YouTube this week in particular, but also this month. And one of the things I wanted to flag before we even get started talking about questions is a number of people on Twitter or on social media, when I mention that I'm on something else, wind up asking me what that something else is and where they can find me, because it's not always too terribly obvious. This week alone, I think I was on 3 or 4 separate podcasts, and they all go into a playlist, which I might make a better effort to highlight on my channel, that I call Crossovers, as kind of a nod to comic book movies and things like that. But you can see my appearances there. I had an appearance on Destin Laguerre's personal video channel, one of the editors at IGN, talking about the Resident Evil contract, which I'll also, I think, be talking about later today on a different podcast. But I do try to remember to share those videos in this playlist. So if you just want to follow me around and check out some of the really awesome content creators that are out there on the internet that are awesome because of what they do, not just because they invited me to talk with them, I highly recommend just kind of going through this list. You'll see appearances by Hoeg Law and Legal Eagle's channel, and on the Iron Lords podcast, where I appear pretty frequently, as well as some other folks. So please do check that out if you're interested in some of those appearances. And I know I've missed some, but I think that's a good way to check out the channel. And I did also want to show the videos that we've done this month. So we'll just kind of click through this. One of the things I've said is that Sony has really helped Virtual Legality this month in particular. If you go and you look at some of the stats on the channel, what people are really interested in are the videos that are all about things like the Sony Capcom contract, things like Sony reversing their decision on closing the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Vita stores, things like the Days Gone director saying you need to buy things at full price, or other things that have happened in Sony's recent past about blockbusters and things like Bloomberg and Jason Schreier articles that now Jim Ryan and Herman Holst and other folks at Sony are trying to kind of move away from. They're responding to some of the backlash is too strong, but some of the feedback they've gotten from articles like that. So if you've got any questions on those videos, if you've got any questions on basically anything else, what I recommend is using that @Hoeg Law. That tends to highlight it for me. Otherwise, carry on with your conversations yourself. I'll check in on the chat periodically. Also, we have the super chats, which, just like supporting through Patreon or the Streamlabs or anywhere else, obviously every single little bit is appreciated, and those get highlighted as well. But please don't feel any obligation to do that in just this kind of lighthearted question time stream. So with that all being said, let's talk about a few things, right? So I've got a question here from Mike B. What was your favorite movie as a child? That's a great question. Childhood is a long-term project, right? So at different levels of my childhood. I had different favorite movies. I think the first one that I can remember when I was really, really young was the Muppet movie, the original one. And really enjoying, in particular, I think the song that a lot of people enjoy, The Rainbow Connection. And apparently I am told by people that remember my childhood better than I do that I went around the house singing The Rainbow Connection. Whether or not I did a Kermit the Frog impression, I couldn't tell you. But I certainly really love that movie, and it holds up. If you haven't seen the Muppet movie, it has a very specific kind of humor that, outside of maybe celebrity references and things that don't hold up over the years, still makes it a very charming movie today. So I really enjoyed the Muppet movie, and I'm growing up in the early '80s. I enjoyed a lot of the movies coming out of that era. So thanks for asking. Has there been any update on Apple versus Epic? No, everything's pretty much still kind of getting ready, gearing up for the trial to start in early May. And we might, depending on how we frame this, do a kind of get you caught up. Here's where things stand as we head into the lawsuit type video. That would be a fairly short form thing, just designed as an entry point for people. It's not going to be available for the mass public. The judge decided that earlier. I think it was this week. So they're going to have media phone call representation and some other limited public representation. But to be frank, it wasn't the kind of thing that I could just sit on a call for 8 hours a day anyway. I do have a law practice to run myself. So one of the things we'll be depending on is kind of other secondary reporting. And if things pop out that are really impactful and I think are really interesting, we will, of course, cover them here. Epic versus Apple is one of my favorite things to watch, and it's getting very well known nationally. I think the Wall Street Journal just ran a fairly generous biography of Tim Sweeney in their pages, and I think that's worth checking out, especially if you're a subscriber to the Wall Street Journal. They did a good job. It's just very nice about what Epic's trying to do. So I will definitely be following it. You'll definitely get updates. When the opinion comes out after all of that, you will definitely get a long-form video from me for that. What it looks like in the midterm while the trial is happening is probably very much dependent on what pops out of other people's reports. I'm not a journalist. I have to kind of rely on that mechanism. But I thank you for asking. Certainly, I sent out a firm update, which I do monthly for patrons at that level that support the channel. And one of the things that was a bullet point in that firm update was, hey, I know everybody's got Epic versus Apple circled in May, and talking a little bit about what I just mentioned, which is here's the game plan. I don't know what it's going to look like. Might do a primer. And heck, there might be stuff coming out every day, and this becomes the Epic versus Apple channel for periods of time. And I'll try to cover other stories as well. I think I've made this joke or comment before, but when I started this, one of the questions I had was whether or not the video game industry and business and law and pop culture in general could support a channel like this. Would I run out of topics? And wow, has that not been the case. In general, I'm always keeping a backlog, a term I'm sure video game fans are familiar with, of potential topics, which are nice. If they're a little bit evergreen, I can pull them off the shelf on a lighter day. But very often, I can't cover everything that I even want to cover. I've got a super chat from the Ash and Luca. Thank you. Appreciate your insight. Hey, I appreciate the super chat and the support of the channel. I appreciate everything that everybody does to come in here and have the conversations and give the upvotes or the downvotes to tell me I'm wrong. A number of you like to tell me I'm wrong. I like that. I like the spirited debate. This is why I became a lawyer, is to have those fun conversations. You keep the ad hominems away and you keep things in a reasonable minds may differ kind of area. I love it all. So it's very nice of you to say that I've got the insight. I like to think that I do. That's ideally what the channel is doing when it's doing things the best. But thank you. I very much appreciate it. Have you considered getting a guest spot on Dropped Frames by chance? I don't think I know that one. Do they do video games? Are they doing law? You'll have to tell me a little bit more about that channel. What kind of cuisine would you like to share with Leonard French and Legal Eagle? See, you're going to expose me on these kinds of things. So I'm very much not a foodie. So I'm a sandwich guy. I'm a hot dogs guy. And I think if I were to share cuisine with those gentlemen, I would have them doing the ordering. I feel like Legal Eagle knows a few fancy places that have stuff that he would know and he could order, and I would ride along. But no, in terms of food, I'm the wrong person to ask for specialty foods, because I'm a guy that likes his franchise chains just as much as he likes going for those fancy closing dinners. And I often feel they're wasting the extra resources on me for the fancy wine or whatever it might be at one of those closing dinners. And if you haven't ever been to something like that, when a lawyer, a transactional lawyer, does a merger or an acquisition or big deal of any kind, very often there's a celebratory meal at the end where a lot of people drink, a lot of people eat. It's one of those kind of 5-6 hour affairs. Very enjoyable, very fun to kind of get to know your clients a little bit better in a capacity that isn't all hellfire and brimstone. But yeah, it tends to be a little fancier than I'm used to. Let's see here. Finishing up my undergrad, thinking of taking the LSAT and applying to law school. Any advice, or have you made any videos on this? Thanks. No, I haven't made any videos on it. My advice is to go where you think you should. I know that's not terribly useful, but one of the things that I've had happen and that I've seen both in law firms and law school is people relying on other people's advice, saying, oh, a lot of people always said you should be a lawyer, you should do X, Y, or Z, and ultimately becoming unfulfilled with that, either in law school, which is okay, or at the law firm level, which is a little bit less okay because you got the law school debt, you've got to figure out how to work through that and that kind of thing. So in terms of preparing for the LSAT, I think there are probably some good books out there. It's been a few years since I did that, but it's a fun test if you like logic problems. It's primarily reading comprehension and logic problems. And then law school itself, I can tell you from my personal experience, was some of the most fun education that I ever had. You know, you talk about thinking like a lawyer and those kinds of things. Law school was just really fantastic for me. I really loved it. I did well in it. That always makes things a little bit better, right? You like things that you do well at. But I think it is very much worthwhile if you like this kind of content, if you like thinking about things from the perspective of how do these two businesses work together, what are the incentives at play, how do those structures affect the day-to-day, then I think law school might be something that you really enjoy. Let's see here. Oh, hey, Hoeg. Hoeg, I've been here since sub 1,000. Keep it up, my friend. Great work. Thank you. Yeah, that's awesome. I have a couple people come in and say, oh, I've been watching since the Ace Combat impressions, which is definitely year one. And one of the things I said was, I really need to do more lighter stuff more often because I do like that flavor on the channel. And there's just been so much kind of heavy or important news that I do more virtual legalities than impressions or postmortems. And one of those that we might chat about here is that I don't think I'm going to do a postmortem on the channel of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And if we get into it, I'll talk about why a little bit. But overall, it's just because I didn't very much like it. And I don't really want to be a YouTube channel that just has massive negativity. So if you have more questions on that, we can talk about it as part of this. Let's see, what else do we have here? Dropped Frames. Oh, good. This is a follow-up. Is a show that is put on by JP, Con Carnage, Ezekiel. Okay, Twitch streamers. They talk about the issues and or gameplay that they experience with certain games. Sometimes they go legal. Oh, no, I haven't contacted them. They haven't contacted me. I know Con Carnage is a name I recognize when I was covering and when I still occasionally cover Twitch terms and conditions, some of the music, DMCA takedown stuff. I know he covered one of my virtual legality videos on his channel. So, no, it's a good follow-up, and I appreciate the recommendation. Have you read any novels by Terry Pratchett? That's Discworld, right? It's a long time ago. I couldn't tell you that I am a particular Terry Pratchett aficionado. Although I did definitely play the PC game Discworld way back in the day, aging myself a little bit. But I was a big fan of adventure games coming up, and so I always really enjoyed those. Hey, Hoeg, I'm still waiting on that Hoeg Law clock with the Easy Allies. Yeah, the Hoeg Law clock, I have to find a manufacturer for that. If you go through the normal services online, a lot of them don't have clocks, surprisingly. So I will keep an eye out for that Time Erased games. I will try to see if I can't find something that is a little bit clock-y, if not an actual alarm clock or something like that. One other thing I did want to flag, somebody did ping me on Twitter here when I put up the link to this video, said, hey, question for today's live Q&A. Does YouTube's creator responsibility initiative really affect negatively a person's channel, or in the end, it's inconsequential to everything that was already there? If you aren't familiar, just on the YouTube side of things, and this is one of those kinds of topics that we talk about here in Virtual Legality, is creators and streaming. I started this channel partly because a couple of my clients were doing this kind of thing, and I was interested in how it all worked together. And YouTube's kind of pushed for this creator responsibility initiative. Mostly, it's nothing. It's community guidelines in terms of service. But they do highlight one of the things that we talked about in respect to Twitch earlier in Virtual Legality, which is that they want to have a stronger ability or a focus on defending the quote-unquote YouTube community from things that are happening off-platform. If we see that a creator's on and or off-platform behavior harms our users, we may take action to protect the community. Beyond the content you upload to YouTube, here are some examples of platform behavior that we may consider inappropriate: intending to cause malicious harm to others, participating in abuse or violence demonstrating cruelty, or participating in fraudulent, deceptive behavior leading to real-world harm. Geez, I guess some of the corporate press release statements aren't eligible to make YouTube videos anymore, eh? Ooh, sorry, shots fired. No, so I mean, I think you do have to look at one of these things and at least take on its face that YouTube is interested in doing some of the stuff that we talked about Twitch doing, of going and saying, hey, did you do something elsewhere, and now we're going to take everything off your channel or demonetize it or what have you. Now, in the kind of real politic equation here, it doesn't change much because, as we've talked about, YouTube and Google have always had the right to say, we don't want to host your stuff. And so if you wind up appearing at a political rally they don't like, if you're in a viral video they don't like, they don't really need a reason to pull it off to just remove all your access. You've agreed to that in the terms and conditions, regardless of what the channel guidelines or the terms of service actually say. And remember, the community guidelines are very ambiguous and very vague in these kinds of platforms. So I believe it's YouTube that has the line that says, if you get close to the line, we can do something on the guidelines, which of course means that you didn't violate the guidelines. They've just interpreted that it's close enough and that they want to take some action. So thank you for the question. I think ultimately it's the same as it was, but you should note, just like when the FTC or the FCC or any other aspect of government rattles their saber, that they do mean that their eye is focused on some of these things. They are going to be looking at off-platform behavior, and it wouldn't surprise me if they were looking to make an example of somebody that would hopefully make a good example for this purpose. So thanks again for the question. Let's see. Hoeg Law, what games are you playing right now? That's a great question. So this week in particular, I've been playing Run the Law Firm mostly. But I have found some time to play some games. I'm still working through the Outriders campaign. In fact, I had that ready to go to talk about. I'm still working through the Outriders campaign. Haven't quite gotten to the end. I was a little bit worried when I saw all of the inventory wipes happening. I know some folks at the Iron Lords podcast that I mentioned earlier had their inventory wiped. I hate to see that, so I got a little skittish about actually playing the game. And then I'm also kind of playing a few other things. I just got Nier Replicant yesterday. I really enjoyed Nier, and certainly Nier Automata also recently. And so I was looking forward to that remake. Didn't really get into it much last night because, again, late work nights for a lawyer. And I've also been playing a little bit more of Immortals Fenyx Rising, which you might remember if you saw it, was one of my top games of 2020. And I really think that Ubisoft has done an absolutely brilliant job with the DLC. And so a new, I think the last piece of DLC for that game dropped this week, in which they take what is that Breath of the Wild game and they essentially make an isometric action-adventure Diablo game out of it. And so I haven't gotten into it very much, but I really like when Ubisoft takes risks and does weird things with their games. So I think that's primarily what I'm playing right now. Outriders on the Xbox. Immortals Fenyx Rising on the PlayStation. Also been working through Crash Bandicoot with my daughter, my eldest daughter, because she's finally kind of gotten into doing the really Twitch gaming type stuff, and seeing her learn to do some really difficult platforming. If you haven't played Crash Bandicoot 4, it is quite hard. Has been a real joy. And even if she did use all 30 of my lives on a boss or two. It's worth seeing her kind of grow in that capability, and just a lot of fun. Highly recommend it if you're a parent. Thank you for asking. What do you think about the Sony CMOS bomb thing? As I say, there's a virtual legality for that. That's clock blocked. That's actually our most popular video in April. I'd like to think it's because of the excellent analysis and real legal acumen on display there. It's probably because of the title. Sometimes you hit with a title. And in fairness, the title to this particular one is inspired by, if you didn't know this, one of the early proposed titles for Ratchet & Clank: A Crack in Time, which was rejected, I believe the story goes, was rejected by Sony for being a bit too risque. But not too risque for virtual legality. It didn't really bother me. If you've ever played the Ratchet & Clank series, you know they try to squeeze in innuendo in their titles. But yes, you can go check out Clock Blocked, the legal landscape of Sony's, I think it's expiration date problem is how I describe it, for information there. As a longtime watcher, I would love you to do a deep dive on unionization, forming a union in the games industry and all the steps and challenges. That's a good idea. I think it could be really interesting. We could talk about that. You know, the one caveat there is that, especially with the PRO Act, and I'm not going to get too deep into Senate bills or anything, being contemplated by Congress, there are potential changes on all kinds of things with respect to unionization and labor rules that are filtering their way through the U.S. government. And so it might be something I wait on if I do it at all to make those conversation points. But I think we could do it like we did the Washington, D.C. Video and really talk about the steps necessary and what hurdles or non-hurdles there are there rather than get too mired in the politics. We try to avoid in virtual legality and here on the Hoeg Law YouTube channel getting into the political side of these questions that are terribly fraught for a lot of people and then impact a lot of people's lives. And then a lot of good, well-intentioned people have very strong opinions on really in both directions. So we'll look at that. And I appreciate the suggestion. What's your thoughts so far on Outriders? It is good. It broaches really good on occasion. And certainly as a guy that likes lore and narrative, they went all out in terms of writing paragraph after paragraph after paragraph for basically everything related to their game. I think it gets a little samey midway through the campaign, which is where I'm stuck. I think it has a few kind of spikes in difficulty that make the game a little less smooth than it could be. I've heard some negative things about the end game, but I can't comment on them myself. My brother has gotten to end game because he really loves it and is begging me to get there so that we can try it out a couple times together. But I think overall it's a very good, like, AA type experience that I'm very glad I have. As soon as that's a little less risky for inventory and things, I will certainly start plowing through it again. I think it's a good game, but it probably doesn't kind of get to the greatness level that I would like to see it at. Sir, do you think DMCA live strikes will become a thing, and would it bring up some legal implications? Do I think they will become a thing? Well, I mean, you could strike anything that's out there. I don't know exactly what YouTube has, honestly, as their tool set or Facebook Gaming or Twitch for if a copyright owner sees a live stream that they object to and they hit the button, can they cut it off instantaneously? I actually haven't been following that. I think that overall, in the grand ecosystem, there just aren't enough eyeballs to cover live streams too often, except for the really big ones. If you've got a really big streamer that announces that they're just going to do something that sounds like it's a copyright violation, chances are, yeah, you have an in-house counsel or an outside counsel go and you watch it and then you submit the report and then things happen from there. Outside of that, the really big ones that really sound like they're going to be controversial, you're probably not going to see that too often, I wouldn't think. But Lord knows the DMCA is not the cleanest bit of law and certainly is ripe for... if not abuse, very broad readings by those interested in the copyrights that they hold. Nier series is so good. Everyone go buy it. I love Nier. And I think it's a great thing that it got a remake because it was kind of clunky before. And obviously, as an American, I've never gotten a chance to play it in the brother-sister kind of relationship. It was always father-daughter. So that adds a little wrinkle. And certainly 60 frames per second is nice. Be funny if Hoeg opened this video. I don't know what that means. Outriders endgame is not good if you are playing solo. You definitely need to have a teammate or two helping you out. Completely changes the experience. Yeah, one of the weirdest choices in Outriders is that if you're playing with even one more person, you get one revive. You can go down, you can lose all your health, and you can stand back up. And for whatever reason, while you are solo, you can't do that. Wouldn't change anything, but you can't do that while you're just solo. And so it does make everything you do as a solo player significantly harder. And I mentioned the difficulties in kind of balancing it and smoothing out this ride, if you will, no pun intended, honestly, through Outriders. And it's the kind of thing you see with a lack of polish, right? There are certain aspects of this game that have lack of polish. And one of those is kind of, they didn't smooth out the difficulty. They didn't fully think through maybe all of the design decisions. And believe me, if you're ever playing a video game with my brother, you will hear every single design complaint that he has. It's amazing the man still likes video games because it's his profession, and I don't really blame him, but it is amusing. And so I think it's a really good game. I very much enjoy playing it. But yeah, it hasn't had that 15th polish pass that you get from like a Sony first party game or even a second party game. Certainly, if someone were to ask me what I'm looking forward to most, I really cannot wait after seeing the previews for Returnal. I think that's going to be a really special game, and I'm really rooting for Housemarque to have made a really special game. So that's certainly one of the things that I am looking forward to the most. It's nice to see a few more AA games becoming popular recently. Reminds me of the PS2 era. Absolutely. We need more variety. If you go back and you look at my Sony's Glory Days Gone ? Video, I don't blame Sony for putting money in investments that are going to make them the most. I love that. Good. Go fight Microsoft. Microsoft, fight back. Let's get some good stuff out there for consumers. But certainly the PlayStation 2, the Super Nintendo, whatever era you want to point to that's a little bit older, had more variety. It wasn't just all cinematic, over-the-shoulder games plus open-world games, and that was your ecosystem. And so I love to see successful AA medium-sized games. I love Game Pass for one reason, and that's because it allows me to play indie games that maybe don't show as well in just screenshots or pictures that could have a good idea, but I can't just bet $15 on that. And Game Pass gives me the opportunity to play something, and there's been some real gems in there. And littler games are things that are just a lot of fun. One of the things that I played most recently, went completely all the way through it with my daughters, was a game called Not a Game, or There Is No Game, I believe, actually, on the Nintendo Switch, which I understand because people helped me understand it on Twitter, was actually available, I believe, last year for PC, but the port to the Nintendo Switch is new. 100% highly recommend it. If you find yourself in virtual legality, and did I not change this thumbnail? That's very funny. Let's see if I could change it on the fly here, because it's not Cyberpunk we're talking about. If you find yourself watching virtual legality and are interested in things like video games, the gaming industry, even law to some extent, then you should definitely check out There Is No Game, because not only is it a driving narrative and a fun little puzzler, it's not really that hard, it is a commentary on all sorts of things, like how adventure games play, a commentary on how free-to-play works and monetization and microtransactions, and just really, really funny. Like, just a really good job of making it lighthearted and not mean-spirited and being funny all around. So this is my big, not a sponsored post, big push for There Is No Game, just absolutely fantastic. Almost certainly going to be on my top 10 games of the year because of how much I enjoyed it. So please do check it out. Good morning, Hoeg Law, and please thank you for highlighting the Hoeg Law. I know there's a question there. If games are subjective, how could one be universally loved? I don't think there's anything on earth that is universally loved, right? Every time I see on a forum, am I the only one that hates X? The answer is always no. By the way, the answer is, if I'm the only one, that question, it's always no. There's always more than one person that believes that thing. But there's somebody that hates the greatest art in the history of the world. So I think universally loved is probably a little bit of a shorthand for almost universally loved, that almost everybody loves something. You know, I famously get into it on some of these podcasts because I think Mass Effect 2 is probably my least favorite Mass Effect. and that gets people's ire up. And, I explain myself as I do here in Virtual Legality and elsewhere, and I think people understand why I have the feelings that I do, but it's still, I think for the most part, everybody else's favorite Mass Effect. And, the shirts and the mugs and everything else, reasonable minds can differ, means, hey, it's a great thing that the world has people that like and dislike different things, because that allows you to have those conversations, and that's part of living life as well. It would be a very, very boring place if everybody liked exactly the same thing and found the same satisfaction in only the same art, the same books, and the same shows, and the same food, or what have you. And so, yeah, there are things that aren't universally loved. I don't tend to like Mass Effect 2 as much as others. I didn't really like the shift in the Resident Evil series that happened with Resident Evil 4. We could get into it in terms of my kind of non-orthodox positions on things, but I also love a lot of things that other people love. You got to go into these hoping that you like something, and if you don't, that's okay. And if other people loved it, this is one thing I would change about social media. If other people loved it, great for them. You should be thrilled for them that they loved it. It just doesn't have to be for you. Not everything was made for you. Not everything was made for me. And so, yeah, a little bit of a tangent there. But no, I don't think anything is truly universally loved. Okay, going to take a brief sip of water here. Do they really think any games through anymore? Feel like we, the consumer, became the test group. I do think that when you've got patching, when you've got the ability to change things on the fly, there is a certain amount of last stage polish that can probably be justifiably kicked out into the live service environment. Whether that's Outriders or something else, to say, okay, if we can tweak it, we can tweak it on the fly later on. That said, I think here in 2021, it's extraordinarily difficult to make games, especially if they have a server component, a multiplayer component. You don't have to defend these companies for putting them out there that way, but it's a very tricky thing. And so I give at least some leeway to a lot of these studios, a lot of these publishers that are putting things out. And generally that I think video gamers should understand and know that the first week of most games is probably going to take a little time to get things where they need to go. That does not justify things like inventory wipes. That's a bridge too far. That is far worse than a lot of other kind of problems that you can have for a looter shooter. And so that's a really significant blotch on Outriders' record. But generally speaking, server access and little things and bugs, I don't really have as much of a problem with as I think some of the internet. Some of that comes from knowing, 30 years of video game history and saying, hey, before patches, we still had bugs and bad stuff. They were just there forever. And so I do think that it's better to be in an environment where those things can be fixed, even if it can sometimes make you feel like you paid to be a beta tester. So thank you for the question. That not a game. There is no game is absolutely glorious. Yes, it 100%. The game is fantastic. Yes, live streams can be struck. I knew that they could be struck after the fact. They can be struck live. I mean, the problem is you don't have kind of a defense. That's the same problem with the DMCA in and of itself, is that it's essentially assumed to be correct by the platform holders for most part, and the time period is too long that you can have something struck. So if you are abusing the system and a live stream is just about how much you hate, I don't know, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Disney wants to come in and strike you and say it's copyright infringement, and it's really not, then they can keep that opinion that you hate Falcon and the Winter Soldier off the internet for 10, 14 plus days without even having to go through a lawsuit process. That's one of those areas where if you go and you read the literature on this, you find that, yes, the Copyright Office and the people that are in charge of looking at this want to protect the copyright holders more, which is something I've commented on in Virtual Legality as being somewhat ridiculous to me, but also acknowledge that the time period is too long for things that are clearly not correct in terms of strikes, that you shouldn't be able to just kill a conversation for 10 days, 10 plus days, based on your say-so when you don't even feel like going through a federal process. You're just trying to get that opinion out of the world for a period of time. And we do see that happen, even though the Copyright Office and the various folks in charge of that don't acknowledge it as much as I would like. I agree nothing is universally. TLO, You, and Witcher are both boring to me. I couldn't finish them. Yeah, and those are 2 games that I absolutely love. So, yeah, to each his own. You're always going to have things that other people love that you don't like. Hoeg, if you're looking for a great World War II free-to-play game that has a decent amount of polish, check out Enlisted. I'm surprised at the quality of that game. Okay, I will check it out. I don't know anything about it. If you could become the creative leader of one video game series and had whatever technical skills were required to hold the role. Yes, don't ask lawyers to code or do math. Don't do it. What series would it be, and where would you take it? Oh, well, so this isn't going to be... You want to talk about answers that, aren't going to drive viewership to the channel or anything like that. It is very clear to me that I would take control of the Star Control franchise. And if you don't know Star Control 2 is my favorite game of all time. And you can actually go and you can play it for free right now, completely legitimately, because the owners of the source code released it for that purpose in a form called, I believe it's the Urquan Masters, UR-QUAN Masters. And Star Control 2 is a spaceflight type RPG in which you are the captain of a ship trying to free Earth from its slave shield that was put upon it by a hegemonic alien race. And that might sound a little tropey, and in fact it is. But as part of that game, you are exploring planets, collecting resources, meeting with new and interesting folks, and all in a dynamic environment that can really change. It is from the early 90s, if you can believe it. But it remains my favorite game of all time. And right now, Stardock has the Star Control trademark and made a game called Star Control Origins, which was my number 2 game of the year in, I think it was 2018, I think is when it came out. They did a great job. But certainly, if I could have more of a voice in bringing that to market and bringing it to more people, what Star Control is, what it means to me, that is what I would do because I think it is absolutely fantastic. It is a name that should be known with the Halos and the Marios, in my opinion. Alas, it is not. But I thank you for the question. That is my favorite game, and certainly has the capability of being my favorite game series of all time. Don't really play Star Control 3. It didn't go in a great direction. Come back for Origins. Thank you for asking. Most Sony titles seem to be pretty bug-free on launch. I wonder if only having to develop for one platform helps. Undoubtedly. I think Sony also is very protective of its brand and is spending that money on polish to get things up to snuff. Like, I do think Returnal is very likely to be polished. It's a single-player game. It's got Sony bucks behind it. And most importantly, it's really, if we think about it, Sony's first big PS5-only entry. And so it's important to kind of come out with the full fanfare and the trumpets going and everything else. So I do think Sony spends more on one more iterative pass, right? If we think about something like Cyberpunk that came out absolutely broken, I have no problem with anybody's complaints about it, but you look at it, it will in all likelihood be fixed on some time frame. And it looks like it's going to be a year plus. But if you imagine that Cyberpunk would come out and be released on day one in the fashion that it will likely get to by, let's hope, the end of this year, then at that point you've got that polish. But that's money. Time is money is very true because you're paying salaries, you're paying all sorts of infrastructure costs. And so Sony can afford to say, hey, we need this to all play well and be great. And if it doesn't, that's a blight on us. And it's one of the reasons I think that Sony really got upset at Bend and the way Days Gone released, especially when you look at Days Gone and say, for me, who beat it about a month after it came out and had no technical problems at all, and the patches were coming fast and furious, I fully admit, it looks like about an extra 2 months from when the review copies went out, it was pretty darn good. And so, yeah, I think that Sony puts in the money and is concerned about how games are received on their platform and wants to have that extra polish, which essentially is time and money. Let's see, what else do we got here? Mass Effect 2 is basically a giant side quest. Preach. I'm sure we'll talk about that later, I'm sure. I'm set to be on the Iron Lords podcast to have a big old Mass Effect debate when the Legendary Edition comes out. In regards to my last comment, what's your thought on CD sales? It seems all games are being sold before ready with day one patching, basically meaning it's digital anyway. Yeah, I think that the fans of physical are perhaps diluting themselves a little bit just based on the amount of changes that happen to a game after its release in physical format, certainly after it's been pressed, right? Even day one patches come in and they can be huge, and those aren't on the disc. So I don't think that the physical form in terms of preservation and legacy is really the ultimate answer for the industry, unfortunately. Have you ever almost said, and I'll see you in the next episode of Virtual Legality, in a court at the end of proceedings? So here's the fun fact, Full House Gaming. I know I've mentioned this before, but I think new people come in, they've got new subscribers and followers and things. I'm not a litigator. I am not in court. I am not a law and order type ba-bum lawyer. I am a transactional attorney. So what that means is I help businesses get formed, get funded, work on their contracts, negotiate those contracts. And then if a dispute arises, if there's a big time fight, I've got a referral I can send you to go fight that fight in disputes and cease and desist letters and everything else. Like so many other professions, the practice of law is split into specialty groups. And the biggest divide is litigators and transactions. You won't go to the same person to register your trademark as you do to potentially defend that trademark in court. And you won't go to the same person to write your contract as you will when you have to fight over it. So no, I've never said it in court. I have said virtual legality as a phrase when I mean to say virtual reality for a client who's working in that space. Right? So in my head, I often have a pause after virtual, depending on what it is I'm talking about, because I don't want to say legality when we're talking about virtual reality. Oftentimes, I'll also say VR because you can't get caught up in quite the same way. Are many games developed with VC money or through other funding sources? To what effect do you think a large increase in capital gains taxes might reduce VC funding for game development? So VCs, if you aren't familiar with the term, venture capital groups are primarily investing in high-risk technology companies. Video games, for the most part, aren't going to fall under that definition because a video game is a retail good. Yes, it's very hard to make video games, but you can pretty much frame out how much it's going to cost and if it's successful, how much it's going to make. Venture capital firms are investing in a lot of wild things that 90% are going to fail, and one of them is going to make them $1 billion. That's what VC is. They're always looking for that play. That's where that funding comes from. And I believe this question was asked because I do a lot of venture capital work. I'm in Michigan. I do a lot of work with the University of Michigan and venture capital and organizing those kinds of things in Ann Arbor, if you're familiar with the area. So VC stuff in video games doesn't quite match up. It can if there's a technological component. I have had clients that have worked in VR in interesting ways, some that you might know that relate to having VR in spaces and using new technology to identify those spaces and carry VR units with you and all sorts of things. And augmented reality and fun stuff like that that had venture capital backed components and had video game pieces. And so I do think capital gains tax increases will change if they go through, and I don't know that there's been a formal proposal. I did see the speech. And it'll change structures and how that money goes in and out. But like Jurassic Park, for the most part, life will find a way. And if taxes get high enough, generally speaking, tax structuring lawyers get relatively cheaper, and there are different ways to put entities together and different ways to handle ordinary income to make sure those investments get done. But yeah, certainly as a business transaction guy, you got business tax increases proposed. That is going to lower some amount on the margins of the activity in various industries. And yeah, as a guy whose bread is buttered by helping facilitate those kinds of transactions, I watch that kind of stuff. Thank you for the question. Hoeg Law, opinions, excitement for KOTOR remake. I have none. I hope it's a real remake. I believe it came out that it's being done by Aspire, who has mostly done kind of ports like Republic Commando. It sounds like it's a real remake. I don't know anything about their full capability of making a remake like that. So I have no formal opinions. I am, like every other project that sounds exciting, hopeful. I want it to be awesome. I want every game and every movie and everything else to be great. Unfortunately, that's not the world that ultimately winds up being the one we live in. But certainly I love KOTOR, and it's a fantastic choice for a remake, and I hope it becomes as awesome as it could be. What is the most bonkers startup idea that you have ever helped? Bonkers in a good or bad way. obviously to the extent you can talk about it. Yeah. One of the most fun things about being a venture capital lawyer and working in a technology corridor like the one from the University of Michigan is working with what I usually call the James Bond technologies. When in a James Bond movie, Q comes out and has some weird gum that helps you understand languages or some other weird thing. And I get to see a lot of those technologies in play. I think for the most part, I can't be more specific than that. Obviously, attorney-client privilege is very important. It's the kind of thing you can get disbarred for. But it is always super, super exciting. It's one of the reasons I started Hoeg Law as a separate endeavor, was to help entrepreneurs and real geniuses with crazy ideas for medical technology and things that can save just hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives, and helping them get through that process, because that genius that knows brain chemistry, doesn't know capitalization tables and limited liability companies and everything else. And that's where I feel I can add value to the world, is helping them sort through those things and get them to a place where they can get funding, and that technology can come to commercialization, come to fruition, and really help a lot of people. And so I've gotten to see a lot of cool things. I will tell you, as I said, a lot of those cool things don't work out. It's a testing process, creative destruction. And the entire process is one where the venture capitalists, and I know they're easy to hate in a lot of contexts, if they're doing things right, they're adding value in terms of expertise to the companies, and they're taking a lot of risks. 9 out of 10 of the investments are going to lose money, and that one is going to be the one that saves lives or otherwise changes the world in some way, if things are going right. So thank you for the question. I've seen a lot of cool stuff. I don't think I can share too much of the specifics there. Sony is refusing to fix PS4 consoles. They offer a service where you pay out of pocket if out of warranty to fix. However, for an overheating issue, that should be considered a manufacturer screw up. Well, if it's out of so I tend to agree that certain aspects of a design can be placed on the manufacturer. However, the law is pretty specific about how products liability claims work, and they vary by jurisdiction. One of the things that happens is if you're out of warranty, generally speaking, the manufacturer can ask you for money to fix something. And you can bring a suit, you can bring a class action against manufacturers for a design defect or for something that is specifically built to break. But it's very difficult to prove. So I understand the frustration with something like that. But I would say, if you are interested in that kind of thing, you should talk to a class action lawyer. You should talk to lawyers that specialize in product liability claims, because they're often very difficult to bring. And you say out of warranty. If it's a day out of warranty, that's a little bit different than 7 years out of warranty. So it's certainly a conversation that I understand, and I've had my issues with platforms, believe me, and controllers. But it is one that is maybe not as clear-cut as internet folks would like it to be. Hoeg, I wonder if you have any thoughts on the Pokemon proto leaks that occurred since 2018. The entire Nintendo Giga leak was essentially collateral damage for Poke hackers. Love to hear your thoughts. I actually don't know the specifics on that. I did do a video on the Giga leak when it happened, talking about kind of the legality of people putting the leaked materials up on their own sites. But I don't have many other thoughts on that. And certainly if you want to add additional context, I'd be happy to hear it. Let's see here. I have to agree with Munchie. I have a friend with a PS4 that sounds like a jet engine, and it's in absolute dust box because he's never cleaned it. Well, I mean, there are also certain aspects of maintenance that can go into a conversation like that. Heatsink is often full of dust, blocks airflow. I hear you. PlayStation 4s. Am I right? Yeah, no, my PlayStation 4 got loud towards the end of its life. So I understand that. The question then obviously becomes, what damage is caused by the loudness and whether it's performing still to the capability that it has. So I get it. So, I think we're at about 50 minutes for this. I don't see a bunch of other questions here. I thank everybody for coming in. If you got another question, now's your chance to kind of sneak it in there. just flag it with a Hoeg Law. But otherwise, I am so very, very thankful to everyone that helps support the channel in various of the ways, whether that's subscribing, just liking, disliking. Disliking is fine. YouTube actually doesn't care. I think it might like dislikes more. I have no idea. The algorithm is a strange and magnificent beast. Using Patreon, Streamlabs, buying shirts, buying mugs. I appreciate every little bit of it. Obviously, the channel has become a significantly bigger endeavor than I had originally imagined it to be, and I am thrilled for that. I'm thrilled for getting the chance to talk with you all and spend all this time talking about issues that I know are near and dear to all of our hearts. And hopefully help illuminate some of what's going on, whether it's with Resident Evil or something else. And so thank you so very, very much for that. Thank you so much to all the patrons who helped make Question Time possible. And I've been very enthused about the growth of the Patreon and about some of those other avenues. I continue to look at other areas of putting the videos because YouTube still is somewhat of a suspicious partner on all these kinds of things and striking the channel in various weird ways. And so I think I couldn't be happier with where we're going. And I think that the channel and the community is only going to get bigger from here. So Uncivil Law is back. When are we going to do that collab? DM me. We'll get this done, Uncivil Law. I apologize. Certainly for the first go around. I don't remember who dropped the ball on the second go around. Let's get it done. Happy to talk. And DM me. We'll make it happen. Do you have any colleagues in your field of law that you'd recommend in Australia? That's a great question. No, I don't. I don't have an Australia connection. A lot of law firms use a referral network. And so if you wound up having a specific area of need, you could email me and I could see if one of my other colleagues has a referral network member there if you're interested. Always happy to help try to connect people with good lawyers. Otherwise, I am going to go for now. I think you'll be able to find me on another podcast pretty shortly this morning and afternoon talking about Resident Evil. So please do look out for that. Otherwise, I will catch you on the very next episode of Virtual Legality. Thanks again.